Good evening. Welcome to the September 5th, 2023 meeting of Findlay City Council. My name is Grant Russell. I'm President Pro Tem of Findlay City Council. The mayor is absent tonight, so Council President Harrington moves over to the acting mayor position. I come over to this side and get to act as the council president and run the meeting. And with that, roll call, please.
Mr. Ballman?
Here.
Ms. Frischi?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
And Mr. Wobser?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Acceptance to our August 15th session council meeting minutes. Mr. Slough.
I would move to have the minutes approved as circulated.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. We have no add-ons or replacements, no proclamations, no recognition or retirements. Petitions.
The status of the County Road 220 annexation for parcel 02-000-100-6785 and 02-000-101-3263 for the status of that annexation. It's now going to City Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning for the zoning portion of it.
So we move those to City Planning and Zoning Committee.
A zoning amendment request for 1700 Fostoria Avenue. That's the Findlay Center for Bus and Technologies from Dan Stone and Van Horn Hoover and Associates Incorporated on behalf of Nippard Industrial Holdings LLC to change the zoning from C2 General Commercial to I1 Light Industrial.
Refer to City Planning and Planning Commission, or City Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning Committee.
An alley vacation request for Coventry Drive West Yates Avenue from Paul and Brenda Miller to vacate the east-west alley between East Yates Avenue and Coventry Drive, bounded by lots 26 to 34 in the Old Orchard 4th Edition and 4006 to 4020 in the Chamberlain Hill Edition.
And we'll refer that to City Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning Committee.
And a zoning amendment request for 1600 East Melrose Avenue from Philip Lawson on behalf of Strausch, is that how you say it, 3 Ltd, to change the zoning of from C2 General Commercial to M2 Multifamily High Density.
And refer that to City Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning Committee. And we'll move on to oral communications. We have a few folks that would like to address us first. On the list is Andy Hatton with Findlay City Schools. Mr. Hatton, if you'd please come to the microphone, make sure that that little red light's on. State your name, address, and please sing your high school alma mater for the record.
Okay, the red light is on. Good evening, I'm Andy Hatton, 108 West Lincoln Street here in Findlay, and I'm the new superintendent here in Findlay City Schools. And I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself to you. I want to thank publicly the Board of Education in Findlay City Schools for giving me this amazing opportunity. I am entering year, I should know the math, 27 or 28 in public education, and I absolutely love what I do in service to children. And I've been so fortunate to inherit an amazing team here in Findlay City Schools, and we are working diligently every day. We've had a great opening to the school year. I've heard from many veteran teachers that it's one of the best starts we've had in a long time, which I had very little to nothing to do with. It was what the team did over the summer and last spring to prepare for that. But I've been visited all of our schools, some of them a couple times, interacting with students, getting in the classrooms, and we're off to a great start. I can tell you, obviously, I haven't lived in Findlay very long, but this is an amazing place to live, work, play, and raise a family, and that's a great testament to this city council. I hope that our schools continue to represent this great city, which is why I'm very proud that our Board of Education has as its North Star in the strategic plan, excellence, opportunity, and belonging. And that's what we want for all of our children and all of our families. So just very glad to be here. Reach out if you ever need anything. I hope we continue the great partnership that we've had for a long time.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Just a quick comment. Andy, welcome to Findlay. We're
Thank you.
very happy to have you here. Everybody, I'm sure, in this room, anybody that takes time to come to a city council meeting, I'm sure is very proud of our schools and what we've achieved over the years, and look forward to continued improvement in that area. So it's a huge job, and it's a tough one. I've always said people that run for school board take on a lot more responsibility than the folks sitting on this side of the room up here. It's much tougher dealing with a bunch of with tough parents. So appreciate what you do, and welcome to Findlay.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Tom Ross. Tom, name, address, and you got 4 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. My daughter goes to school out there. If you see her making any trouble. Excuse me. All right, good evening, everybody. Sorry for the dark humor. My name's Tom Ross. I'm here tonight to do an on-the-record Freedom of Information Act request and share what I believe is a potential public health risk for the community. Superior Plating Operation, 0 Clinton Court, is currently under demolition, as you probably know. And I'd like to start with something simple. In 1975, EPA enacted the RCRA statute, Resource Conservation Recovery Act, that forced the states to adopt. It identified big polluters that they deemed to be potential problems. They called them wastes from specific sources, and they gave them K or F listed codes. A lot deeper than you need, but the important piece here is that plating operations satisfy that or fill that need. They actually are a K and an F listed waste source. So because of the K and F listing, all materials from either manufacturing or disposal or demolition are considered hazardous waste unless proven non-hazardous through sampling and analysis, and issued an EPA administrative rule. So my FOIA request, the first one, is provide sampling data, an EPA letter of administrative rule of exemption that the material removed from 0 Clinton Court, the former Superior Plating Operation, is deemed non-hazardous by EPA. If you can't satisfy that, then my second one, if no such letter of administrative rule is available, I'd like for you to provide the following. And all this should be available right now because all of the documentation I'm about to spell out has to be under the RCRA Corrective Action Program put in place before a single blade of grass is turned or a single brick is removed. First, the RCRA Corrective Action Plan, EPA approval for clean closure, the Personal Protective Equipment Plan, and training certificates for each type of PPE used on the site. The Respiratory Protection Plan, complete with IH and/or safety professional signatures. The Site Safety Plan and HAZWOPER restricted area map, complete with entrance and egress points and decon areas. Air monitoring, both passive and active, and the air monitoring results proving that the material is being contained and controlled during the demolition, which is a very serious one. The OSHA 40-hour training certificates and site-specific hazards training for every person that sets foot on the site. Hazardous waste manifests containing the EPA ID number and disposal activities signed by someone in authority, given authority via the EPA definition to sign on behalf of the city or county. The transporter EPA ID number and DOT hazmat certification, which is required under the law. Again, even the transporter from point A to point B has to be in the loop. The TSDF, final destination information and certificates of disposal for all the waste shipments. Of course, a stormwater pollution prevention plan to prevent runoff into the river right there from the equipment. And of course, the follow-up post-closure equipment decontamination procedures. Now, you need to understand this is serious. This is a very serious statute, so I hope you all are listening. Failure to implement any of the aforementioned documents is considered a public potential hazard risk. Why is that? Because you're dealing with something called hexavalent chrome. What is hexavalent chrome? It's a very nasty chemical. It's on the EPA and the OSHA and the 313 CERCLA list of the 1,200 most nasty chemicals in the country. Why? Let me read you the SDS sheet from Fisher Scientific. It states as this: it is a carcinogenic, known carcinogenic, with an exposure limit of 0.00002 parts per million. Forgive me. It is also a mutagenic. I don't know if you know what a mutagenic is, and I know if I'm going long, I apologize.
30
but this is-
seconds.
All right, it's a mutagenic, and mutagenics affect the womb. They can change the genome forever, and it's a teratogenic, and it can affect the egg or the male sperm and pass on the genome forever. So I urge you, I ask you, actually demand actually, you ought to be able to provide this information immediately because all these documents are required before anything was done out there. Thank you. I'm sure you're going to ask for questions.
Question for Mr. Ross. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
Can I?
Oh, Ms. Fishy?
I don't know that it's a question for you or not, because a lot of what you said was.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
So I'm sure we'll get you what you need. However, I actually had a couple folks ask me about that site at the fair this week, and it's a question maybe you can answer for me, Rob. They said that, why did the project stop over there? Are we on pause for some reason? They said it. Everybody kept saying it should be done by now, and it's all dug up and like it paused. Are we paused?
I have not talked to the contractor. They've been in process of excavation, and they're managing that project.
Okay, so we haven't ran into any issues. That's
Not that I'm
good to
aware
know.
of, no.
Thanks.
Mr. Stasiak?
I guess just for the benefit of the record, who's the person with regard to the city who's directly responsible for this and this information, so that the public is aware and everybody knows, since it is a city-owned property at this point?
Is that a question, Jim? Okay.
Yes,
Directed
that's my
towards,
question.
directed to whom, Jim?
Are you
I'm
asking me,
asking, no,
Auditor?
I'm
Oh, I'm
asking the
sorry.
question. Who, like, if I want to know more, first I've heard this information. I'm hoping that we fully comply, but who's the person who should fill this request? And who's the person directly responsible here on behalf of the city, since this is a city-owned property and we're talking about hazardous waste? I would just like to know on the record who here is in charge.
Refer information to my office, and we'll take care of it from there.
Well, it's a FOIA request, sir, so I think I have to give it, I think, to Dawn. Don't I, Dawn? I have to give it to you directly, or at least to somebody, a mayor or someone. I'm pretty sure. I'm happy to give it to you if you can just pass it on. I'm not trying to be difficult, but
Refer information to my office, and I'll take care of it from there.
okay. Well, then
Other
here's some
questions?
information for your office.
Thank you. Next up is Renee LaGuire. Renee?
Okay, good evening. Thank you. I'm Renee LaGuire. I live at 148 Larkin Street here in Findlay. And I just wanted to read, I had a letter to the editor in the paper on Saturday. And those of you who don't get the paper, I thought that I would just read it, and then that's my comment. It's about the $40 million park. And it's called Proceed Slowly on the New Park. Most of us feel the pinch of ever-increasing prices of gas, groceries, housing, clothing, real estate taxes, sales tax, and federal and state taxes. This is happening because the politicians, local and otherwise, are reckless with other people's money. And they see it as theirs to spend with little regard for the people. We, the people, the taxpayers. Every now and then, they need to be reminded that we are their bosses. So it is with the $40 million park. I am not opposed to a park. I am opposed to a $40 million park. So it is with the $40 million park that the city of Findlay wants to build, not to mention the $4.4 million just to design it. The new park will cost each Findlay resident at least $1,000, so a family of four would pay $4,000 at a minimum. We are told that grants and donations will pay for the park, but grants are also taxpayer money in a different form. No one knows yet where the grants or donations will come from, according to information from the August 15th meeting. We have to wait to pass it to find out this information, which most likely will take place at this meeting. At the very least, this park should be put on the ballot for people to vote on. Would you buy a house without knowing how you would pay for it? Recently reported in the Courier, there was a stabbing at the Fort Findlay playground, which also resulted in one person having a broken femur. Having so many nice parks which need to be cared for and apparently patrolled now. It is a luxury that we have here in the city of Findlay. So City Council, proceed slowly on this idea and give people a chance to vote on these issues. Most people are so busy trying to keep up with inflation and taxes that they have no time to look into this park idea. The $40 million park sounds nice, but when you then put 300 housing units on it, there's going to be similar crime problems. So I want you to proceed slowly. I hope that you either table this or don't vote on it tonight. But $40 million is a lot of taxpayer money. Even if it's through grants, it's still taxpayer money. So I think it's time that that we be a little frugal. I have to be frugal. My husband and I are both on a fixed income, and I have to be very frugal with our finances. And I don't appreciate wasting taxpayers' money. So.
Questions, Holly?
I don't believe we will be voting on this tonight. We're still waiting on the phase 1, phase 2s to come back. I appreciate your letter to the editor. You talk about putting it on the ballot to vote. I know there was a statement made, and maybe Jim, you can refresh us on council, that council can possibly do that to avoid the citizens doing it and maybe being a little more drastic than maybe council if we wrote something, but I don't remember what you said. Can you refresh?
Mr. Stasiak?
Yes, I had a conversation with bond counsel, and we regularly discuss finances of the city and whatnot, and this was such big money. The conversation came up because it is significantly controversial in our community. And bond counsel stated, as a municipality, you have the ability to put a non-binding, basically opinion vote of the community out. So you can put on the ballot the question, are you in favor of us moving forward with this park as proposed by the preliminary designs dated XX as proposed by the mayor? And take that preliminary vote, and again, it's non-binding. In other words, even if the whole community says no, you could move forward with a component of it, but the intent is for you to gauge the entire community rather than the subsets that are speaking in your ears on a regular basis. And that was the comment I made. And I don't think it's a bad idea, but certainly I'm not a council member, so it's at your discretion.
Other questions for Renee? Ms. Frishy?
So one more question then. What would the cost be for
This is a question
like
for the speaker.
So it's regarding this topic.
Okay.
So unless you want Renee to ask Jim, I can just ask him.
Mr. Wobser?
I had a question, so I'm
It was
waiting for
not
an
addressed
answer.
to the speaker.
What?
Mr. Wobser?
Excuse me, I had
Mr.
a question
Wobser.
and you are out of order. The hammer's coming down. Renee, can you ask our city auditor what that potential cost would be if the city council were to put a opinion vote non-binding on the ballot, please?
Yes. Mr. Stasiak, could you answer that question for me, please?
Yes. I don't know the actual cost, but I would infer that, we have general elections twice a year, primaries and the general in the fall. As long as it was included within the time frame as required by the Board of Elections, and there was an election in place, the cost, I would assume, would be minimal. You're talking about language and counting those votes. So they may have a charge, but I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Mr. Wobser?
Renee, you said you were not in favor for it, so you're in favor of the park. Am I correct in that?
I am in favor of,
A park, which is, so you're something.
something
So
that
tell
is
me,
reasonable.
what is your dollar figure that's correct for this park?
Oh, I don't have a dollar figure
Okay,
that's
thank
correct.
you.
However, I do think that the parks that we have are not being maintained.
Okay,
And
that's what I wanted to know, is what you thought a good number was for this park.
yeah, I don't know, but
All right, thank
but
you
I
very
think
much.
that the cube out there, some of those steps out there are extremely dangerous for those people that are watching. The park looks great, the fields look great, but where the people sit and the pavers and things are loose, and it could be a very dangerous thing for people. So maintain what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next up, Haiti Sadler. Ms. Sadler?
used to my glasses. Thank you for hearing me, Council. As you all know, I ran for the City of Findlay mayor in the primaries, and I ran for many reasons. One being the way the mayor handled the unconstitutional masking of the residents, and another was because I was on the strategic planning committee of moving Findlay forward. I realized then that the city was not actually listening to the voice of the people. As I researched information on the City of Findlay and our trajectory, I grew sincerely concerned that our local government was using globalist companies to build our infrastructure. While I'd like to think that this is unintentional, the idea that our Republican mayor and council are allowing Metronet, a solely funded company owned by Oak Hill Capital Investments and KKR, both companies with George Soros affiliates, an anti-American, should be alarming to all the residents of Findlay. Smart 15-minute cities and regionalization of our water systems in place for more government control only adds to the dangerous direction you are leading us. In addition to the smart 15-minute surveilling communist cities, using globalist company Suez North America, doing business as Utility Service Company of Georgia, for our water systems, consider the farm animal restrictions, bike paths no one uses, broken up islands people voted against, and annexation of residential neighborhoods city residents oppose, add the $40 million park. We have to ask ourselves, who are you building this city for? Because it's certainly not for the residents of Findlay. Those claiming to represent us need to be held accountable for not doing their jobs. Thank you for your time.
Questions? Thank you, Haiti. Next up is Andrew Corso with AEP. Andrew.
Thank you. It's good to be here again. My name is Andrew Corso. I'm the manager of projects in Central and Northwest Ohio. I think I see some new faces that maybe weren't on the council in previous updates. Try to keep this short here. I'm here to give an update on what we're calling the Findlay to Fifth transmission line install. There is an underground component and an overhead component. The underground component, if you look on page, I think it's the third page where it says Findlay to Fifth underground project status. The underground portion is 100% complete. Jeremy, I would say the city and AEP both consider this underground portion complete, no outstanding items as far as...
No, the punch list items you guys had, you took care of for us.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Just want to make sure that my definition of complete is your definition of complete, because it really doesn't matter what my definition of complete is. So, proud to say that we took care of the underground portion with hopefully as minimalist amount of headache to the city. So I guess I can continue on, or if there's any questions on the underground, we could do it now or table it towards the end of the discussion here. All right. As far as the overhead line route, if you go to the 2 pages in, there's another milestone schedule, Findlay to Fifth overhead installation project status. Proud to say that we've now just recently installed all of the transmission structures. About to finish in the cable pulling between those structures. It says underground line put in service. That's supposed to be overhead line put in service. Is scheduled for 10/9/2023, so about a month from now. Normally, we would wait for the distribution and third-party transfers to occur and wait till the project is towards the end of completion before we start reclamation. We're not going to do that here. We are able to actually start the reclamation early, which is starting next week. So residents and business owners don't have to wait until next spring to see their grass grow and their grades get taken care of. So I will say that there will be touch-up in the spring, but we're going to start next week to make one heck of an effort here to get as much possibly done as we possibly can in this growing season. The type of construction is allowing us to do that. There will be some poles left over that we've got to pull out of the ground and touch up next spring, but we're kind of doing things out of sequence for the benefit of your community. And then we'll continue on with distribution cable transfers and third-party communication line transfers through the end of the year, and the project should be complete. My definition of complete is 100% complete. AEP's version of complete, the city's version complete, as well as the property owner's version of complete. Should happen in the early spring of 2024 for the overhead portion. And there is one other component that we haven't talked about. There's a removal component.
40 seconds.
Thank you. That is going to happen here towards the tail end of the year, down the alley from Marathon Substation to Hurd Avenue, and from Hurd Avenue down to Putnam, where we go and we actually take the transmission portion of the cables off the top of the line and lop the top of the poles off. We'll be working with the city on the same type of process that we have with right-of-way notifications. Property owners will be able to then voice any concerns back to AEP so we can address them like we did with the underground, and we'll be working with Jeremy's office on closures and things like that so they can be posted to the website.
Hold on a second. I'd make a motion to grant him that extra. All those in favor, please say aye. And you may continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I was really towards the end there, but I appreciate you doing that. So just to recap, underground portion, 100% done. Overhead portion, we'll have the transmission energized by October. The project finished next spring, but we're not waiting on the reclamation. We're doing that out of sequence and doing it now to benefit the community. And then the removal portion is kind of down that tight alley, which will require some additional lane closures localized to that alley, and that should be done by the end of the year.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frischie.
Just you say whopping off the top and in an alley. I'm not familiar with the alley, so is that going to be a concern to people that with them being shorter?
No, well, if you can imagine a pole, wood pole, power pole. The first from our standing position, the first thing are third-party communication lines, AT&T, cable companies, things like that. Above that is the distribution lines that feed the actual houses. Above that, on that particular alley, there's a transmission line that used to provide power that has since been deadened. There's no longer carrying power there. The new underground line is actually running the current. We've got to go and actually remove that top transmission wire, and then we'll lop the top of the pole off right above where the distribution line is. So the poles,
so not hardly anything being chopped off.
No, it'll just shorten the pole to maybe 3 feet above where the distributions are. So we're removing a little bit of it, but not removing the actual structures. Those will remain. We're just lopping the top part off.
But it'll clean up those wires and stuff, which will look better.
Yeah, you'll have less wires. Correct. Good question.
Andrew, in the overhead installation project, you mentioned the third-party communication line transfers. Does that put them on the larger new metal poles? And then is there going to be a reduction or removal of some of the existing wood poles as a result?
That's correct, sir. Most of the existing structures that were there now that we've transferred the transmission and the distribution to, most of that will be removed off of those poles onto the steel poles. There may be situations where there may be a existing wood pole where we call them service drops, where they come off of the transmission, the steel structures, and go to a subsequent transitional pole. We call them drop poles, like with the service can, the transmission or the distribution transformer that feeds it. So you will see some wood poles. There'll be drop poles, but a majority of the wood poles you see will be removed.
Good. I think most citizens think less poles equals better.
Oh, I completely understand. Yes, sir.
That.
Yeah, so a majority of those poles will be, old wood poles will be removed.
Mr. Hellman.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Crusoe, for coming back and giving us an update on this. But I feel obligated to express my disappointment in the size of those poles, as I did the last time, and probably will remind you that every time you're here. But don't let that discourage you. I feel an obligation from an urban design and an urban planning standpoint that this is not beautification of the city, in my opinion, those size poles. So the next time you have dinner with the president of the company, you can express my opinion. I'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
It's not a problem. I appreciate it, and I will look forward to the next reminder from you. It's not the first nor the last conversation we'll have about the steel structure, so thank you, sir.
They are awful.
Ms. Frishy?
Do you have another, so this phase is finishing and then we're never going to see you again? Or you're going to find another neighborhood to bring those poles to? And if so, which one?
Another neighborhood within Findlay. I was actually just talking to Jeremy about, we do have other projects in and around the Findlay area. I won't say it's a hotbed, but I mean, there's a lot of economic development up here. With economic development brings increased power demands. There's also aging infrastructure that we have to replace to keep the lights on. So will it be the last time you see me? Probably not, but I won't say we have anything in the near future here, especially in downtown Findlay. I mean, there may be stuff on the outskirts, but we're going to be talking with Jeremy from time to time about the upcoming projects, and I don't know how you'll relay it to council for updates moving forward, but I think it's a kind of a case-by-case basis of me coming back.
Yeah, we can kind of talk. I can talk with you guys and relay what he's saying. Depending on where they're at, time zones, and all that. Can't answer technical questions or anything like that, but at least you kind of know. Okay, we've been talking about this. Give you an update. May not have timelines or anything yet because I know a lot of that stuff is a couple years out before we talk about it, and then all of a sudden next day it's happening. So I'll keep relaying that as much as I get it back and forth. It might be emails to you guys or something like that, just simple with my weekly or updates that I send out. So I'll keep you updated as much as I know.
And I think the first meeting we had, I think somebody asked me what this is. I said, well, for council, the very last page is the most important. That's got my contact information on it. You're welcome to email me, call me on any question that you have for any project AEP has. I am the manager of projects up in this area, so I don't anticipate going anywhere anytime soon. I like you guys. You're fun. Well, I mean, and I know we got to get moving on here, but I personally feel, and AEP feels, an obligation to communicate with the public. I think if there's communication, even mass amounts of communication, I think it's easier to stomach, and you have a contact to give you the answers. Maybe ugly steel poles, but you'll at least get the answers that we have, and have good two-way communication. So.
Mr. Hellman?
If I can, on your future projects, I'd like to encourage you to use rear property lines or rear easements as opposed to street side frontage. That's so much more visible. So if that means anything.
No, it does. I mean, that's part of the communication and feedback.
Thank you.
So one last question. When somebody points at one of those poles and said, why did AEP do this? What's the 15-second response?
I'm not sure there's a 15-second. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into what infrastructure we're putting in there. Mostly it has to do with National Electric Code, the voltage, encroachments. There's a variety of things that go into those areas. There's also a durability question. The steel poles are arguably a lot more durable than the wood poles. Industry standards. I really don't have a good 15-second answer for you.
Well, Denny will ask you about your 15-second answer in your next visit, so appreciate you coming in.
I'll be prepared.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Written communications.
An email from Katie Erickson on No to Downtown Park project. An email from Haiti Sadler regarding Downtown Park. An email from Kai Crum regarding new Downtown Park. Email from Herbert Franks regarding Downtown Park. Email from Barbara Williamson regarding thoughts on Downtown Park. And an email from Kathy Wingent regarding several items to consider.
Questions or comments? Move that the written communications be filed. Reports of municipal officers and municipal departments.
A letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding resolution accepting millage rates and amounts. He requests that this be read.
Mr. Palmer?
I move that this letter be read into the record.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All in favor of reading this letter into the record, please say aye.
Aye.
Please proceed.
The County Budget Commission has completed their work and returned our certificate of estimated resources for our 2024 budget. Our tax millage has been certified exactly as submitted, 2.6 mils for the general fund and 0.3 mils each for police and fire pension funds, to a total of 3.2 mils, approximately 3.7 million. Local government money is estimated to be at $785,000 for next year, subject to likely adjustments by the state. Council should now accept the amounts and levy the tax rates as certified by the Budget Commission. The proper resolution must be adopted and returned to the county auditor no later than September 30th, 23, I think. I have therefore asked the Director of Law to replace the required legislation on your agenda for the September 5th meeting. The resolution requires one reading.
Questions or comments? Letter be filed.
Board of Zoning Appeals for July 13th, 2023.
Questions or comments? Minutes be filed.
A letter from Fire Chief Everly regarding Firehouse Subs Foundation grant.
Questions or comments? Letter be filed.
A letter from President Pro Tem Russell regarding ad hoc committee on request for transfer of property to Habitat for Humanity.
This requires a vote of council to create the ad hoc committee. Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve the ad hoc committee as stated.
Second, Mr. Ballman. Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
We need some clarification from Brian Bauman. Is he the chair of his association, which is part of West Park, called Baker's Acres? Because if he is, I feel it's inappropriate for him to chair this committee. Can you answer that, Brian?
Mr. Bauman?
Well, absolutely I am, but I do not share that that perspective.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
I'd make a motion to remove Brian Bauman as chair of that committee because of what I feel is a conflict of interest when we're going down this route for Habitat.
Mr. Wobser?
What's the potential conflict that you see, Ms. Frishy?
He is chair of his association, and from what I'm understanding, he's not sharing information with them through another group, and he will be personally impacted as a property owner. So as chair, being chair of this committee, I feel it's inappropriate. He's more than welcome to attend those meetings, but for him to be weighing in as chair or president, from my understanding of his association, I don't think that is kosher.
Is there a second to the motion?
Of course.
Mr. Niemeyer? Second?
Yes.
So do a vote.
You can voice vote.
Okay. Questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Wobser?
Brian, where's your association that you're involved in located in comparison to the Habitat properties that we're talking about?
Well, I mean, they're still Findlay property, but it is across the street on Carlin.
Across Carlin?
Yeah.
Yes, when I asked for people who were interested in this ad hoc committee, Brian was the first one who contacted me. He obviously has great interest, and because he represents that ward, I thought that actually made him the leading candidate to be on the committee and chair of the committee. Other questions or comments? Mr. Hellman?
Regarding that point, were there others that had contacted you?
The 4 people who contacted me are on the committee, or are recommended to be on the committee.
Did any of them volunteer to be the chairman?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Frishy?
Further details for the record is a couple weeks ago there was a West Park Block Watch meeting. I attended it, Brian did as well. I know 77%, they did a survey, 77% said that they were not in favor of the project. They asked their council member if he would support them with their view. Since he did not support that with McPherson. He could not answer that. I know that group has gotten active. I know we're starting to see yard signs out. There's a lot of contested feelings happening in there, and I just think it's inappropriate being president of that committee. So that's all.
Other questions on the motion? All in favor of the motion to remove Brian as chairman of the committee that has yet to be formed, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Nay. The motion does not pass. We have a motion to approve the committee as per the letter.
Mr. President, or Pro Tem.
Mr. Wobser.
Can we take a roll call vote on that? I didn't realize. I thought we were going to do a voice vote.
Okay.
My apologies.
I'm sorry. Let's do a voice vote on Ms. Frisch's motion seconded by Mr. Niemeyer to remove Brian as chairman of the committee that is yet to be created.
Mr. Ballman?
Nay.
Ms. Frischi?
To remove is aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
Mr. Russell?
Nay.
Mr. Slough?
Nay.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ayes.
Okay. So
Just, will you make sure they understand what I vote was? When they
So the Brian is removed as chairman if the committee is called as recommended. All those in favor of so we have 4 folks on the committee, and we'll let them choose their committee chair for themselves at their first meeting. And questions or comments on we had a motion and a second to approve the committee as recommended, now with Brian removed as chairman. Other questions or comments? Ms. Frischi.
So this is removing him as chair, but keeping him on committee, or it removes completely?
That would
Remove as chair.
you made a motion to remove him as chair, is the way I understood it.
Yep. Thank you.
And we'll do a voice vote on the committee as proposed with Brian not as chair. All in favor of the committee as proposed with Brian not chair, please say aye. Those opposed, nay.
Oh, you want roll. Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frischi?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Only 1 nay.
And so the ad hoc committee is formed.
A letter from Police Chief Matthias regarding Ohio Attorney General drug abuse, known as DART grant program.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding revolving loan fund administration.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding jake braking and noise pollution.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frischi.
Rob, I don't know if you can answer any of these questions. What is the ultimate goal of creating a jake brake? I mean, have you had a lot of complaints, or are you focusing on cruise night being the sound issue, or the railroad crossings?
A collaboration of all the above. The noise pollution in certain corridors of the community have been discussed at great length with engaged community members. Center Street in particular, from Maine up to the railroad tracks. Have we had extensive conversations about it, and this is just proposing. There's a few things that have been hot topics came out, it's just staring at you, I don't know, anyhow.
I like that.
Discussion points from the Center Street group were some ideas to reduce noise would be the frequency of railroad or train horns, jake brakes, etc. So we just want to have conversation about what that would look like to make an effort to reduce the noise.
So it's more than Jake, because Jake breaking is not going to address a railroad or cruise
That's
night.
correct.
So you're looking at a second ordinance for noise pollution as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Greeno.
I think that the cruise night has already been addressed somewhat. The last couple cruise nights that they've had, the police have had a more presence up there. You're never going to stop as long as a cruise night, unless you completely shut off the cruise night, which I would be adamantly against shutting off the cruise night, because I believe a lot of people enjoy that. People just need to stay in restraint and under control when they're up there for that. I know that it's hard for some people to do that, and if they get picked up, so be it. But I know there has been a better police presence at the cruising at the end of the month. So,
Mr. Martin.
So that's a great point, Councilman, that Chief Matthias, we've talked about that, and target enforcement has been increased, which has seen positive results with some of the distractions that happen on those. But again, there have been conversations reaching out to the rail companies to see if we can reduce the sirens through the community at certain times, the frequency, et cetera. Don't know if that can happen. So we're having those conversations. I know that there are communities that have had success with that. So we just want to look at the options we can reduce some of the noise, and this was the first step the mayor wanted to take.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding bulk trash and tire drop-off event.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
Rob, again, what do we typically pay to do the bulk trash and tire pickup every year? Because we obviously don't do an ordinance usually. Is it really $20,000 to provide that service?
And I might need a little help from Jeremy here, but we had one earlier this year and had great success. We used ARPA dollars for that, and because of the positive results of that, we wanted to do it again because of the feedback we had and the results of the trash. So that's the initiative that the mayor wanted to go with this, and that's the ask for the additional dollars because of the original success we had this year.
Is that different than our regular backyard mission when we?
no, that's tied together.
Mr. Greeno.
I believe that was tied together with the backyard mission trip this year. And it has been for several years, but I think this year was a bigger push for tires and trash, if I'm not mistaken.
That is
So this
correct.
was tied to the backyard mission trip.
That's what so this
Yes.
is, we see more tires and stuff that we want to try to do a second round.
Correct. Thank you.
Letter to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding DFID MOU.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
Rob, you never got to talk so much to me. So this letter confused me a little bit because it said the city received payment in May of 23, but is it sitting in general fund and needs moved over, or they were behind by a year, and are we 40,000 in the hole? I'm trying to figure it out.
No, we're not 40,000 in the hole. This is a contract that we worked out with them. We provide the services. They're paying for the 40,000 for it. So it was just to, you want to jump in at that point?
Mr. Stasiak?
One of my concerns is making sure we're following state law and keeping funds coming out of the funds that are intended for that. And working with the deputy auditor, when you have certain employees that are in specialized funds, say streets, and they're doing functions in Dorney Plaza, that's not necessarily the intended use of our gas tax. This was a governmental accounting method for us to help the administration properly track these dollars. So for the future, we know that they came out of the proper areas, money was spent out of the proper areas, and we've got it properly accounted for. And long-term, it'll be beneficial to this council because they'll have a better record of what was spent in assisting the downtown Findlay district in doing what they're doing.
Ms. Frishy?
So the 40,000 from general fund is the money from May that came in from the DFID, and we're moving it over?
We're actually taking general fund money and funding this fund, and that way it's seeded, and then as we move forward, the monies that are received from DFID will pay for those functions. And then what happens is from there to, I think, part of your point, and I'm making an assumption here, if I don't address it properly, let me know. every 5-year period, an assessment is done of that group where they self-tax. It's $60,000 per year. And what it's my responsibility to file that assessment with the county, and then they actually do the assessment, and then the money comes back through that county path to us. So we track that pretty closely. So as part of the budget cycle, what I can do is make sure we're giving proper explanations, and this will help us with that and making sure you guys have a clear understanding so that it's not confused. But the main point here was to make sure there was an area where the money was coming from that wasn't allowing for funds to be supplanted that shouldn't have been. And supplanting is the governmental term for using one fund for another inappropriately.
And I'm good with that. I just want to make sure that the money is coming in to cover it. So you're telling me, yes, I'm good, we can move on.
Other questions? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding solar eclipse.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding cemetery sanitary sewer project number 319-34100.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Laurel Lane water line replacement project number 3573080.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
Just curious, Jeremy, what's going on out there? This is out by Outback Steakhouse.
Sorry. It's off of County Road 300. It's in between County Road 300 and Sweetwater. We just, in the past couple of years, have experienced multiple breaks, and it's just getting to the point where we're repairing it more than anything. So it just needs replaced.
Thanks.
Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Park and Airport ADA restroom CDBG project number 319-24500.
Questions or comments? Mr. Greeno?
Jeremy, it mentions 2 parks. What are the other parks that are in that?
Jeremy?
So this is working in, so the last CDBG that you've seen was for the 996,000 for park restrooms. So this is, and that was Rawson and Swale Park. And this project is working in conjunction with it. It's paying for certain portions of those projects. So it's paying for the touchless fixtures or something like that. We have to specify what this grant is paying for and what this grant is paying for. When we ran the numbers and stuff like that, originally what we were going to do when this project originally came out is we were just going to do a couple upgrades, but then we were able to get that other CDBG grant. So we talked with the state and we said, hey, we got both of these, but we want to redo our whole bathrooms with this money. And they said, yep, we're good with you run them and maintain them for that. But a big part of this is the airport restrooms. Those need to be in compliant. So that's going to be a big portion of this fund.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding small water line upgrade CDBG project number 357238800.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Han I-75 County Road 99 DDI interchange PID 102375 project number 3281100 for preliminary participatory legislation.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding South Main Street and McPherson Storm Sewer Repair, project number 355-32800 for additional appropriation.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
Jeremy, when that went to committee, it was 40,000. Why did you downgrade to 30?
Mr. Kalb?
So my 40,000 was kind of off a lot of assumptions. I didn't know what was our next point. We actually, when we got up to the intersection of 6th Street, we were actually able to drop our manhole there because the line going underneath 6th Street was still in good shape. So I assumed that with all those crossings, I think I had 5 different utilities I was going crossing. I put in some contingency for that. This 30,000 is, I feel very confident with that because we have the pavement and stuff, so I know that'll cover it. Before I sent the letter, we still had one final course to go, so it's going to be less than that, but because I had to get the letter in, that's why it's at 30.
I love that you're saving money. Thank you.
Mr. Webster?
Just for council's information, you'll see the committee report that's coming up later. But Jeremy and Rob contacted us with this problem that we ran into on this project, and instead of calling a committee the whole meeting, not sure we could get enough people there, called an appropriations committee, which we were able to get together in about 12 hours, give him the additional money and the permission to go ahead and keep moving forward while everybody was on site. We're running with tight deadlines with schools starting, et cetera. So that was the reason for a very impromptu appropriations committee and for the asking for this additional 30 to cover for the small issue that we ran into down there.
Other questions? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Calb regarding water treatment plant CO2 tanks replacement, project number 357-90800.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding internal controls of the City of Findlay Utility Billing Annual Department Annual Audit Letter. He requests that the letter be read.
Ms. Frischie?
I'll make the motion to have this letter read into the council minutes.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All in favor of having this letter read into the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Please read the letter.
Over the last few years, it has been noted in the management recommendations letter of our annual audit that the internal controls of the utility billing department needed reviewed and improved. In 2002, I contracted with the CPA firm Rhea and Associates to assist with an in-depth, independent special review of that department's controls. On April 11th, Council's Water and Sewer Committee received a detailed report of the status of the City of Findlay Utility Billing Office internal controls. The report included observations as well as numerous recommendations. This Stage 1 review and reported recommendations cost the city approximately $15,000. Deputy Auditor G. Sampson spent several days developing new procedures and working with the utility billing personnel and the department head to be sure everyone was on the same page and able to implement the recommendations. The goal was to be well prepared for a follow-up review well ahead of its scheduled date. On July 13th, the Rhea and Associates returned to complete a Stage 2 review and status update for the implementation of the recommended controls. The attached report notes there are a few items to be completed now, such as the actual cash drawers being installed and some long-term items including a new billing software system. Several items have been completed to date. However, the report also notes several deficiencies in following the new recommended controls. My office has also observed deficiencies. Unfortunately, due to the deficiencies noted in the report of the July 13 inspection, the city will be unable to clear its state audit management comment from the report. Getting our internal control process approved by the state auditor is a primary goal, along with ensuring safe custodianship of the community's money. It will be necessary to bring Rhea and Associates back for another inspection at a date yet to be determined. If the department passes a future review, then there is a high likelihood the management recommendation will be viewed as completed. As city auditor, I can assure you I will continue to take every step that is reasonable and necessary for us to ensure the public that every dollar of their money is being handled with the utmost care.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Oh.
Mr. Martin?
If I just would like to just make a comment of the efforts that were put into the auditor's letter, the deputy auditor, Ginger, and the water superintendent and the team in their efforts. They were lockstep through this whole process with an action plan and workflow improvement. Have you ever been involved in a workflow improvement? Sometimes they get messy. You have changes, and I want to compliment the team from Ginger as well as the water utility billing department for the efforts that have been made. There are still processes that need to be cleaned up, but again, if you've ever been involved in something like this is not a factory widget that's automatically automated and repeated. This is human interaction, and there was a lot of change in our current process. So there are things that need to be worked on, but we need to get a better understanding on when we translated, we took their recommendations and we agreed on what those improvements were to comply with their recommendations, and we implemented those, and now they have further recommendations. We need to understand where that gap is because we were all on the same page when we went live. So again, some of the deficiencies that are being referred to were supply chain things We ordered a safe that would have complied with a recommendation. It just got here. Some new cash drawers that were a deficiency in the second visit. Now they are here. So again, processes are continuing to improve. We're going to meet with the auditor's office and the deputy auditor to make sure that we continue to streamline this. It's been a healthy exercise that is going to make everything better. So I just wanted to congratulate the people that were involved and thank them for their efforts.
Mr. Wobser?
Rob, do you have a timeline to be able to finish up so we can call this good?
Today, when I received my packet, was the first time I saw the new recommendations. So this is all very, very fresh. But as soon as we have a better timeline, we'll definitely keep you all in the loop.
Letter to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding water services for the villages of Arlington and North Baltimore.
Questions or comments? Mr. Stasiak?
I just have a couple quick comments for clarification and the historic record. Two in particular. One, bringing this to light at your last meeting based on the unexpected bill, I think was an important factor, and it's good we're finally seeing some actual verbiage and explanation from the mayor on this. However, I'm very, very concerned because it's clear from the documentation that's been reviewed so far, this is being driven by the Economic Development Organization, which is a private organization that benefits itself, irregardless of the standing with regard to the public-private partnerships that we do engage with them. And the second thing is I want to make clear in the second half of the letter, the mayor refers to that she feels, she believes it is their responsibility to gather the information and be able to give productive information and dialogue. However, we've gone way beyond that. That is clear from the information that I've gathered and what I've been able to obtain. And with regard to that, this body needs to know there is no precedent for something this important to be done in this manner. As a matter of fact, we go back to as recently as, well, I guess for some of us as recently, you're a little older and have gray hair, when Mayor Riddy was here, he got ripped to shreds, and I was with him when he got ripped to shreds for doing something very similar, incurring legal bills without involving this council on something that's such a serious topic. And the other thing is, there's a couple myths going on with regard to Van Buren. The Van Buren water line that was installed was under heavy, open, transparent public comment with all the elected officials, and the city auditor's office was heavily involved from day one. There is nothing being shared with my office, and I'm having an extreme difficulty getting cooperation from the mayor on this issue, and it's unfortunate she's not here tonight to explain that. So there's a lot going on here, and I think the historic record needs to reflect some of that. Thank you.
Mr. Wobser?
Rob, have any agreements been signed by the mayor regarding this issue with either Arlington or North Baltimore?
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Frischie?
I don't know that is a pertinent answer at this point, if any contracts have been signed. But we do have some community here tonight. I know water regionalization has been not a really eye-catching topic for folks. So to give the basics, regionalization, we would bring water to a community, and then the community would handle it from there. Where currently, like if people in Liberty Benton or Van Buren or whatever, we still handle the billing, and they pay 1.5 times for the water. The difference here, this is a big ask, and it hasn't gone to any committee. It hasn't gone to water and sewer. Some council members I've talked to had no knowledge of it. And when we're talking about increasing our usage, we do have plenty of usage in our system right now, but as you know, we're always developing, and we're putting in more housing, and we're putting in apartments, and we're bringing in companies, and we have problems in our community with our water system. So for me, I don't think we are there yet, and the fact that our mayor or the administration, however you want to say that, is meeting with Bricker Eckler, with State Representative Cross's wife. She's an attorney, great, but they're looking at, we had the first bill that came for $9,000, where discussions were happening without any of us on this side knowing what's going on, or having anybody in the public knowing what's going on. Then we have another bill tonight, and that bill's talking about contracts already being drawn up. They may not have been signed yet, But this whole process is completely inappropriate because we need to take care of our water system first and all of you that have any water issues going on or concerns. So everybody needs to tune into this, and we need to have a lot of community input, and we need to slow this process down.
Mr. Baumann?
A couple things. So, if I'm to understand this correctly, the mayor's actions were literally nothing other than a fact-finding mission to see if this was even feasible, if we were allowed, or what confines that would, et cetera. Correct?
Correct.
Secondly, Jeremy or whomever, I see Jason here. What's the current capacity of the reservoirs? If God forbid the sky shut off tomorrow.
Mr. Kalb?
I know I'm not going to get the exact, but it's roughly 3 years.
So
Over 3 years. Over 3 years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Or 4.
Yes, 4.
Mr. Stasiak?
Mr. Baumann, I always appreciate your dialogue at these meetings because first off, the answer to your first question is no, that's not correct. The mayor's well beyond those steps. As a matter of fact, just a couple lines out of the bill. Strategize with the water regionalization team regarding the next steps. Review, revise, and comment on draft agreements for water regionalization project. Review final drafts of the transfer agreement and master meter agreements and transmittal to Mayor Murray. This is significantly further along that's being implied. The second thing is
potato.
Excuse me. Please don't interrupt me, and that's a point of order. Thank you. The second thing is this water system. I was here in the 80s when we had a drought. And when we had a drought, there has been no change to our water system in terms of the amount of water that is available to us, in terms of our structure for doing it and where it comes from. As a matter of fact, the only thing that did change, and somebody brought this up and I thought it was very interesting, we used to get water from wells over by Cary. That water, and I got to compliment him, it was a brilliant move. Robert Bruce back then recognized where those water wells were dumping water and providing them to us is about 1 million gallons per day at the time. And he recognized that if we stopped paying for that agreement, what would end up happening is they couldn't shut off the wells because Cary didn't want to spend the money to cap those wells. So they dumped that water into the Blanchard River, which we pump our water out of. So we get the exact same source of water. And just as a side note, I thought it was interesting. Since that time, according to Soil and Water and the economic development people themselves, in the 70s and 80s, our average rainfall per year was 35.5 inches per year. Now it's down to 33.8 on average, and that's a number they tout. All our water that we receive to fill those reservoirs is from surface water from the areas south and southeast of us. And there's been a lot of studies on that. So to go down this path, to go down it privately, and to say that they have the ability to take this on without consulting with this body, that expertise does not sit in this room to ask the entire amount of questions that need to be asked and do the studies that need to be done. And my point was very simple. If you're going to go down these paths, don't come to this body with a proposal. Come to this body with an idea and get the authority from your body, then to move forward and how you're going to do it and involve this body. I still have yet to hear anything about water and sewer being involved in this. And water and sewer, I think, even should have been involved in one of the expenditures mentioned earlier. This council needs to get involved with these things, needs to be involved in a way that's informative, and needs to include experts. And we are so far down this path, it's unbelievable. And I think it's a complete injustice to our community and the citizens we represent. And it looks like we're representing economic development, not our people. That's my view of it.
Mr. Wobser?
I think that the comments by Ms. Frishy and the auditor have some merit, but
point of order.
At the same,
excuse me, Mr. President, point of order.
Mr. Wobser?
My question is,
no, Mr. Wobser.
My point of order to Mr. Wobser is, are you sure you want to make these comments? That's my only question.
I'm just simply saying that in the past, we have gotten on the administration for not doing their homework before they bring an idea to us. And they have been chastised for that. In this instance, to me, they're just simply doing their homework. Nothing has been agreed to. When it's brought to us, we can sit there and tear it apart. We can bring in all the experts. We can study the hell out of it. But I'm trying to understand the fine line that, Jim, you're trying to draw between what's happened so far, which is incurring some costs. Okay, got that. But simply doing some due diligence to have so that we can have an intelligent conversation when they bring it to council.
Ms. Frishy?
So Jeff, when you say, you know, we're chastising the mayor, that's not what it's about. Like, if you look back while being on council, you know, if a department head had a bill for over $3,000 without a PO, we'd have them held accountable for their actions. We'd be like, wait a minute, we run a budget, we stick to it. If you didn't have permission, what do you think you're doing? Okay? So you had your first oops at the last council meeting when we had a $9,000 bill. And then you say, I don't see there's a problem with the mayor doing her homework. I don't either, until she is spending money over $3,000 and never came to this body or water and sewer. How does she know that city council wants to explore that at this time? How does she know that the community wants to explore that at this time? We have not taken care of our water system 100%. We have things that need to be fixed. I recently learned in the last week and a half, Jason, about the northern ridge of our community. We have the northern ridge from Northgate all the way over to the east side of Findlay, where folks are telling me, I don't have proper water pressure. And it's because we sit high and we're eye level with John Hancock. I get it. But before we start adding more people into our system, don't you think we should be addressing those issues? Don't you think we should be making sure our wheelhouse is in order? So you can say she's being chastised because she's out of line. And if any department head, if Jason did it or Dave Hans did it or anybody else that were department heads, we'd be saying, what do you think you're doing?
Mr. Stasiak?
To answer your question directly, number one, I think Ms. Frishy was very well spoken in her response, and this is totally different. It's totally different because the mayor not only incurred money, $27,000 or $26,000 so far, and with no disclosure of what's yet to come, but it wasn't to explore. It was to hire Christina Cross to negotiate and draft the contracts, to negotiate and draft terms of agreements with two, not one, but two communities based on what appears to be the whims of economic development, because this body knows nothing about it. That is above and beyond the pale. She didn't have council's permission. Council was not informed. You folks have made that clear to me. That's the difference, Mr. Wopser, and it's significant and it's serious.
Mr. Wopser?
I'll pass.
Ms. Frishy?
I wanted to go back to Brian's statement of potato patata, that we can't have a council that's potato patata on things like this. When we're talking regionalization potentially of our water system, we have a mayor we're getting through the water billing hot mess, and there's a discussion out there possibly raising rates 24% potentially. And then if you look at history or other communities, it's not uncommon down the road that we could potentially be looking at selling our water system. I'm not saying we're discussing that, but I'm saying depending how we write contracts, how we have this discussion, and the fact that it's not open for us tonight to go ahead and approve this expenditure is giving a rubber stamp to it and saying potato patata, and we need to stop.
I don't know where the selling of water system is. Real quick, I just want to make sure what we have going on here. We were approached by these two communities to see if we were in a position to work with them on their water. That's where this started. And at the end of the day, we have said, well, let's look at it. Let's look at the feasibility. Let's do our due diligence. And there are different ways to do this. So we got with experts that not only build these systems, but are environmental lawyers that can help us create modeling that makes sense, because we don't know what it looks like. We don't know if this is something that you all want to do or not. every conversation we start when we talk about this is our fundamental responsibility are to the existing citizens of this community to make sure that we provide them water, quality water, and the level that we are, first and foremost. Then we talk about the feasibility of this. We want to bring information and facts to you all and the committee so you can then debate it and have conversation. That's nothing more than that has happened. We don't know if this is going to move forward or not, or you choose to. That's really ultimately your decision, but we want to make sure we give you facts and so you can make the best decision. That's all that's happened at this point. And unfortunately, you had to spend some money to get that done.
Ms. Frishy?
I think you're right, Rob. Feasibility and things need to be discussed. They need to be discussed before contracts are discussed and before we're paying to have those contracts drawn up. So we are out of line a little bit, and the cart's before the horse. And you weren't, well, you were in our community when we combined our health departments. I mean, God help me, I'll say it. Lydia Mahalik did a lot of communicating, and there was a lot of discussion, and it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. I think it took a couple years for us to get to that point. This discussion should be no different. It really needs a lot of vetting to get where we're at, and we need to stop having POs. And I haven't heard once where Water and Sewer Committee says, hey, I want a committee, or where the administration's saying, we're going to go to committee and we're going to talk about X, Y, Z. And it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks since the last meeting. We got to get on the same page.
Mr. Stasiak?
I don't want to belabor this when we get to legislation, and Councilwoman Frishy touched on it. I had a lengthy discussion with the deputy auditor today. We're both in agreement. The mayor has refused to provide me the information I requested that goes directly to what the $17,000 bill is to be paid for, so that I can review it per my statutory duties. So we both agree that that bill probably can't be paid until that information is provided. Now, whether she provides it to me directly or whether she provides it to you through a committee meeting, I don't care, but it needs provided. So I'm going to ask that when you get to the legislation and that resolution is considered, that you please amend that resolution to remove the payment of the $17,000 bill to Bricker until the mayor can properly explain and document those items to me. And if you want a full explanation of my statutory duties, I'm happy to do it.
Mr. Baumann?
I guess I would just point out that the auditor's eloquent speech there is real easy to say when the mayor's not here to defend herself.
Letter to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding ordinance number 2023-43, Phase 2 benching properties.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for August 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for August 2023.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
Just curious, I know we're down just over $1 million. Any thoughts from anybody on income tax or any concern there? Or this is right in the normal wave of
Mr.
the year?
Stasiak?
I'm actually pleased we haven't seen it reduced more. The anomalies I call them anomalies, but the benefit we received from some of the activity in the community, particularly in the business sector, was short-term good. Long-term, it's yet to be seen. But this is a normalization of our income tax since those two big sales in the community of those two corporations. So it's good. It's good we're not lower. I'm pleased with that, and I'm having some good conversations with Mary, our income tax administrator, in the meantime.
Mr. Webster?
And Jim, just to qualify that, we're still ahead of what we had projected for our income this year. So even though we're down year on year, we're still ahead of where you had, and what you and Mary had agreed upon on what our income used for budgeting was, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I project some numbers ahead of those projections, and Mary uses those numbers in her budget. So right now, I have no concerns, to answer your question directly.
Other questions or comments? Report to be filed.
A letter from Fire Chief Eberly regarding the Findlay Hancock County Community Foundation grant.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on August 15th, 2023 to continue discussing the strategic planning process. We recommend to prepare a process outline for the handling of action items on an ongoing basis and to continue discussion on current action items.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? All in favor of accepting the committee report, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Committee report is accepted.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom was referred a request to discuss the request for additional funds for the South Main Street Storm System Repair Project. We recommend approval of up to $40,000 of additional appropriation and continue to move forward with the project.
Mr. Wobser?
We saw that Jeremy only asked for 30 on the legislation, and I'd make a motion to approve the committee report.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
So I'm just going to bring up the same comment. Jeff kind of touched on it. So we have committees. We have Appropriations Committee. Their job is the general fund. We have Water and Sewer Committee. Their job is the water and sewer funds. So this committee report was inappropriate because they really didn't have the authority to make a recommendation, although we needed to do this this situation because we were in the middle of a hot mess over there by Speedway. I'm going to vote against the committee report because it was inappropriate, but I will support the legislation. But we need to start following process and procedure.
Mr. Pro Tem, please note that Mr. Niemeyer's vote was not recorded on that committee report.
It was a voice vote. Oh, I'm sorry. On the Appropriations Committee?
Yep.
Okay.
He made the second, but they didn't record his vote.
I guess that would be my fault.
So Jim, you were at the meeting?
Yes, I was at the meeting.
And you seconded the motion?
Yes, I seconded the motion.
You support the motion?
Yes.
Thanks, Jim.
Hot mess.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
We have a motion to approve the committee report. The motion has been seconded. Any other comments? All in favor of the committee report, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign.
Nay.
The committee report is approved. Legislation resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 2023, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Mr. Slough?
I have moved for adoption of resolution 20-2023.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? All in favor of Resolution 020-2023, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 21-2023, a resolution transferring funds within appropriated funds and declaring an emergency.
Next.
First reading for Resolution 2022-2023, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers, which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to amend this legislation to remove the $17,000 voucher, but also at the same time, as soon as that definition is, not definition, Jim, information is received, that it can go ahead and be paid.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments on the motion to amend? Yes, there is.
I have a question.
Don, is that motion? Don, do you
I want to amend it
Ms.
to
Frishy?
17.
So I don't understand. So the amendment is to remove, but you also want to put the verbiage in that it automatically gets approved after we receive information?
Mr. Wobser?
No.
So give it to me again. What's your motion?
The motion is to remove the payment until the auditor gets the appropriate amount of information that he needs, but once he receives it, it can go ahead and be paid. He will submit it for payment.
So, Jim, would you be resubmitting that as a new piece of, as another resolution?
Yes.
So,
Just the proper way to do
in
it.
essence, Jeff, your motion is really just to remove it.
Ultimately, yes, but we'll make sure it gets through to the next meeting.
Okay. Ms. Frishy?
So I would support his motion to remove, but I would add on, great that we want to give it to the auditor, but I think all of council needs the information and a committee needs formed. So I'll support his motion to remove, but my echo is council needs the information as much as the auditor does.
Other questions or comments on the motion to amend? All in favor of the motion to amend the resolution, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Nay.
The resolution is amended.
So motion to adopt then, or no?
Ms. Frishy?
I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Questions or comments? All in favor of Resolution 022-2023 as amended, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The resolution as amended is adopted. Ordinances.
Let's see. Sorry, I gotta get my place.
Plenty of time.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-75. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for and execute the necessary grant applications and agreements to receive grant funds from the Federal Highway Administration for the resurfacing of Bigelow Avenue from Main Street to Melrose Avenue, project number 328-33800, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Kalb, this is us applying for these funds?
Correct.
75.
So it's part of our large projects that we get yearly. This is just project every
43
year.
and
I have to
71
get
are
permission
tabled.
for it.
To apply for funding to handle 80% of a major road repaving. That is something we generally are pretty happy to support, and I therefore would make the motion that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-075 be given its third reading. Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspending council statutory rules and giving this ordinance its third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its third reading.
Ordinance 2023-75.
Mr. Palmer.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-075.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy.
Jeremy, what are some of the requirements with this grant? Only reason I ask that is recently Councilman Russell made a statement. I think he asked you about doing a bike path similar to Blanchard Street, going that way around to Broad. This is right. This is Bigelow to around. I just want to make sure I don't want to talk about or commit to any shared bike paths. So is that part of this?
Mr. Mr. Kalb.
So that would not be part of this. So this is our large city funds that we receive from ODOT every year. So Bright Road Phase 1 and 2 and 3 would be all similar projects. This is just strictly resurfacing right now. Like I said in the last meeting, if a bike path is wanting to be explored through there, that would be a different grant process through that. This is strictly just resurfacing and all that. But that if it's wanting to be explored further, that can have conversations, yes.
Thank you for explaining that for the public so they understand this grant and so I understand it.
Other questions or comments? All in favor of ordinance 2023-075, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough. Aye. Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-76, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for and execute the necessary grant applications and agreements to receive grant funds from the Ohio Public Works Commission for a replacement water line on Moracle Boulevard from I-75 to Bliss Avenue and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-79, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or authorizing the service director and the safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into a contract or contracts for construction of various projects in accordance with the 2023 department equipment list, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ballman.
Jeremy, what's the timeline on this?
Some of these, I've had some stuff move around that I had projects in there. So with the winter fastly approaching, I would appreciate if we could get it tonight. If not, I mean, we'll make do. But a couple of the projects are going to be going out to bid, such as the lining stuff. Just trying to grasp that while there's some opportunities. But that's up to you guys.
Mr. Stasiak.
I'm going to ask for an amendment to this to include the city engineer as also authorized on this based on some recent conversation we've had at the administrative level.
So
Jim, could you explain that a little bit more? So you're just giving him the ability also to advertise and execute?
Yeah, execute is what I'm worried about.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Frishy.
Jeremy, can you ramble off what this ordinance is made up of completely, because I don't have it in front of me.
Yep. So under police, we had their battery backup machine. That is pretty much for any time we lose power, they won't have to wait for the battery backup. That's complete. That senses that stuff before. The park maintenance, that is a snowblower attachment. That is not a need for that, but we will be, unfortunately, sooner or later. But the next couple are the ones that are kind of what I was bringing up is the Rawson Park tennis courts. That's resurfacing, new fencing for at the tennis courts at Rawson Park. So with that, with how our street department schedule is working and how whether we want to fit that in. Cube parking lot phase 3. So that will be partial repaving of that and sealing the large parking lot on the east side of the cube. And then there's also funds in there for stormwater, and then I have startup funds for the Bigelow bid and design for that. The intersection upgrades, those were sent out to bid. So that is there's 2 Main Street and there's 2 Main Cross ones. So Corey Main Cross, Southwest Main Cross, that is for the construction of that. We have a contractor, he's ready to go. So that is another project that I'm trying to move with it. East Street Water Line is design and bid for that. Sewer lining, bid for that. Large diameter sewer cleaning is bid for that.
So thank you, thank you for that. And then my last thing, Auditor Stasiak wanted to add you, are we going to do this going forward with all going out to bid? Should we go ahead and make sure you're added so Denise knows that, or?
It's normally, I normally put in the mayor, service safety director, and or city engineer to cover.
It just got missed this time.
And it just got missed on that. After she read it, I noticed that, and the auditor said something for that.
I'd make that amendment.
Mr. Wobser.
Did you make the amendment motion?
I did, sir. If you
I
want
will
a
second then.
Thank you.
We have a motion to amend the ordinance, adding city engineer into the those who are authorized. Questions or comments on the amendment? Mr. Baumann.
So I guess for clarification's sake, are we adding then the normal language, the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay?
The amendment was to add the city engineer. Jeremy?
As long as it has both of us on there, we're good with that.
Other questions or comments on the motion to amend? So we have a motion to amend ordinance 2023-079, adding the engineer as a person authorized by this ordinance. All those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell? Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
The motion is amended, or the ordinance is amended. Mr. Ballman.
Given the reasons that Jeremy so politely outlined, I would make a motion that ordinance number 2023-079 be given its third reading as amended.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of giving ordinance 2023-079 as amended its third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Sorry. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended, and this ordinance as amended will be given its third reading.
Ordinance 2023-79 as amended.
Mr. Hellman.
Move for approval of ordinance 2023-079.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-079 as amended, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
And Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance as amended has been adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-81, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into a lease agreements to farm approximately 181 acres in the vicinity of the airport, approximately 64 acres in the vicinity of the reservoirs, all owned by the City of Findlay, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-82, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-83, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to accept awarded Firehouse Subs Foundation grant funds for the purchase of fire hose nozzles on all apparatuses, appropriating funds thereto and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Frishy.
I make a motion to suspend council's rules and give ordinance 83 its second and third reading because it is moving grant funds or donations.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending council statutory rules and giving ordinance 2023-083 its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell.
Aye. Council statutory rules have been suspended, and ordinance 2023-083 will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-83, ordinance 2023-83.
Mr. Ballman.
Move for adoption. Excuse me. Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-083.
Second, Mr. Slough. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-083, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The ordinance has been adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-84, an ordinance amending Chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property referred to as 200 West Lincoln Street rezone, which previously was zoned R3 small lot residential to C3 downtown commercial. First reading for ordinance 2023-85, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Frishy.
I make a motion to suspend council's rules and give second and third reading to ordinance number 85.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of suspending council's statutory rules and giving ordinance 2023-085 its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Went out of order, but Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser? I don't know if I said you,
I
sorry.
think you got him.
Okay.
And council statutory rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-85, ordinance 2023-85.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-085.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 2023-085, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The ordinance has been adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-86, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, this is sort of a standard expense that we receive. I guess I would recommend that the statutory rules be suspended and that ordinance 2023-86 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of suspending council's statutory rules and giving ordinance 2023-086 its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Nay.
And Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-86, ordinance 2023-86.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2023-086.
Second, Mr. Ballman. Questions or comments? All in favor of ordinance 2023-086, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance has been adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-87, an ordinance declaring the practice of engine braking, otherwise known as jake braking, to be prohibited within the corporate limits of the City of Findlay and declaring an emergency. Can't talk.
Ms. Frishy.
I don't want to approve it, but I just wanted to say, should this be going to some committee for discussion? Since all we have is a letter and now we have legislation before any details. I don't know what committee would fall for jake braking and noise pollution, but does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were kind of discussing that on if that should go to traffic commission.
I kind of think traffic commission, but I still think you need more council input. It's a start.
Mr. Wobser.
I would agree with the fact that it needs to go to committee, but I guess I'm trying to think, Holly, what other than that?
I don't
What
know,
committee?
would it be a great thing for your strategic planning to
No,
have
not at
a
this point in
committee
time.
for, well, you have legislation.
Well, I understand that.
I don't
but
know. I mean, it's a start. Traffic commission's a start, but
I would make a motion that it gets moved to Traffic Commission.
Mr. Ballman,
Second.
second. All those in favor of referring this to the Traffic Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We'll refer this legislation to Traffic Commission.
Sorry. First reading for ordinance 2023-88, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-89, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-90, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into contracts for the installation of a separate sanitary line to allow for a dedicated sanitary and storm sewer for the city of Findlay's Maple Grove Cemetery building, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-91. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into contracts with Helms & Sons Excavating Incorporated for a replacement water line on Laurel Lane, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-92. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts in order to receive awarded grant funding from the Department of Development for Americans with Disabilities Act upgrades to restrooms at the City of Findlay Airport and 2 parks, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ballman.
Jeremy, given that the Americans with Disabilities Act, we're invoking that, and we want to get these upgrades made, is that correct? We want to get those done as soon as possible?
So with this will give us authorization to bid that out, so that will be moving up. But between this one, I don't want to jump ahead with the next one, is CDBG. This is just strictly appropriating the CDBG funds. You guys will be seeing legislation again once we send it out to bid for the local funds. But I want to get this so that way regional planning and the fair housing, we can distribute those invoices as needed.
Mr. Ballman.
Given those reasons outlined, I would move that ordinance number 2023-092, be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. We have a motion to suspend council statutory rules and give ordinance 2023-092 its second and third reading. All in favor, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended, and ordinance 2023-092 will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-92. Ordinance 2023-92.
Mr. Ballman.
Move for ordinance number, approval of ordinance number 2023-092.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy.
Jeremy, just clarify for me here. I thought we already had the first phase and all that for the parks and everything. And then this was going to complete it, but this is also going out for other bids. What if we don't get the rest of whatever you're bidding? Not that I expect us not to. We seem to get a lot of grants, but.
Jeremy.
So what we will be bidding on this will be the airport. The park will be part of that last project that or the last CDBG that you've seen. But there are 2 different CDBGs, but part of the money for this one is going to be working in tandem with the other one. So from my end, it's just going to be tracking, make sure I have the proper. But what I will be bidding out separate will be the airport. So it'll be airport and then a park project on 2 separate bids.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-092, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-93. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts in order to receive awarded grant funding from the Department of Development, as well as a community development block grant program for the installation of new water lines on George Street, Garfield Avenue, Midland Avenue, and Allen Avenue, appropriating funds thereto and declaring an emergency. First reading for I'm sorry.
I would, 2023-093 is similar to 92, and therefore I would make the motion that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-093 be given its second and third reading. Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspending council statutory rules for ordinance 2023-093 and giving it its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended and ordinance 2023-093 will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-93, ordinance 2023-93.
Mr. Palmer?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-93.
Second, Mr. Slough. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-093, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
And Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-94. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to execute the necessary preliminary participatory, I knew I wouldn't say it right, legislation for the Han I-75 County Road 99 interchange, PID 102375, project number 328-11100, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer?
Due to the ODOT deadline, I move that this legislation be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of suspending council statutory rules and giving ordinance 2023-094 its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye. Council statutory rules have been suspended and ordinance 2023-094 will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-94, ordinance 2023-94.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-094.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-094, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The ordinance has been adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-95, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract change order with Honebrick Excavating LLC for additional work associated with the South Main Street and McPherson Avenue storm sewer repair, project number 355-32800, appropriating funds thereto and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer?
Due to the discussions we had earlier with the committee report from appropriations, I move that this legislation be given its second and third readings.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of suspending council statutory rules and giving ordinance 2023-095 its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended and this ordinance will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-95. Ordinance 2023-95.
Mr. Palmer?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-095.
Second, Mr. Slough. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2023-095, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
I got one more. First reading for ordinance 2023-96. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into contracts with Kirk Brothers Construction Incorporated for the replacement of CO2 tanks at the City of Findlay Water Treatment Plant, project number 35790800, appropriating funds thereto and declaring an emergency.
Old business. Ms. Frishy.
Grant, this question's for you. On the state route or status of County Road 220 annexation, it talks about I-1. Have we added I-1 in yet? I thought that was one of the new things we're looking under the zoning. We don't have an I-1, right?
We do have, I believe we do have a industrial zoning classification, and that was set when I believe when the original petition was made, they make a recommendation on what the zoning would be. So I do believe we already have an industrial.
Well, we do have industrial, but we don't have I-1. I thought I-1 was one of the new ones we're discussing in committee.
I'm not sure.
Anybody on our committee know that one?
We will, in committee, we can make sure that we have it brought in.
Because if we're not to I-1 yet, I don't know how we can refer it for that. And then the other thing I had 2 items, unless you want me to wait and have somebody else go.
Please continue.
My second one is I've had some more questions about water bills. There was a committee, I'm not sure if you were there, Rob. I think you were, when we met with citizens up in the mayor's conference room for the water billing fiasco. And I thought we had said we weren't going to do any water shutoffs. And people are starting, I know we got one letter to council, but I've gotten a couple more folks that have gotten water shutoff notices. If you can just talk on the record to ease some minds, that'd be lovely.
So there are no water shutoffs with the transmitter reconciliation process. There have been none. There won't be any as we work through this reconciliation. And I don't want to, I was hoping not to have to call you up here, but, and just not if I'm correct, but it's just standard language that's in the system that goes as the reminder of the bill, or that goes on the bill that your bill is due, and that if you don't pay, it will be, you'll be shut off. But that is not happening. We've communicated with everybody with this reconciliation process and the transmitter process that actually the letters went out. They're going out. Okay.
New letters separate from the bill?
With the reconciliation that water and sewer and everyone the council approved with.
We didn't approve anything. I was just asking water and sewer. We have to make changes to our water and sewer policy before you guys can start.
The reconciliation of the transmitters is what I'm referring to.
I don't understand what you're talking about then. Go back for me. So water bill. Yes. Folks that got that were 500%, 499%.
That's what I'm referring to. Yes.
Okay, but we have to change water. We
are communicating with everybody that was impacted by that transmitter reconciliation directly. That's what the utility billing team has been communicating. But no water is being shut off in that process.
I guess I would just say, Jason, if there can be something put on the bill or something, because when they see the red text, it puts people in a panic, and then you're probably getting some people panicking and paying that bill because they're scared to death maybe. And then I just don't know how we're reconciling anything or promising anybody anything until we have legislation in place. So I'm a little confused on that. But if we can ease people's minds, I appreciate that on the record. But if you have a water bill that was 500% or more, 75% is proposed to be written off. Water line from the meter to the house, 50% if you show a bill that you fixed a water issue. And if you're 499% or less, we're giving you a payment plan for 24 months, and nobody is getting shut off. Yeah? Nope, I just want to verify that for the people. That's all I'm.
Mr. Wobser.
I'm sorry, this was under old business.
Sorry, I was looking down.
That's all right. Two items real quickly. I will recuse myself from any further conversations about 2023-96. Also, since we do not currently have a chairman of the ad hoc committee for Habitat, we still need to call a date for the first meeting so that we can take care of that business.
The four committee members can collectively figure out a date and then let Denise know so that it can be published.
Thank you.
Other old business, new business. Mr. Greeno.
Yes, I'd like to set up a water and sewer meeting. So I need the members of that to check their calendars, please, for next week. I'm looking at Wednesday, September 13th at 4 o'clock. That work?
Yeah.
That work for you, Grant?
Yep.
Okay. We will be discussing a request that we've had from the state of Ohio for a water line extension to Van Buren State Park. There'll be a discussion on that.
And while we're talking about next week, on September 12th at 5 p.m., just a reminder that we have a committee of the whole to discuss go through the new zoning code. I think we're going to do that upstairs in the third floor conference room. Matt Cordonier from Hancock Regional Planning will be there to kind of give the overview and answer questions. And then we have, and then we would expect that zoning code to hit legislation in the first meeting, or the second meeting, our next meeting, our second meeting in September. And also planning and zoning will be meeting on September 14th at noon, and that will be here in council chambers. Mr. Hellman.
Can you back up for a minute? You, was that a strategic planning committee?
No, committee of the whole.
That's what I meant, excuse me. And
September 12th, 5 p.m. Tuesday, September 12th, a week from today.
September 12th. I won't be in town, but go ahead without me.
There will be a party at Mr. Hellman's house immediately following the committee of the whole.
There'll be plenty of gas in the grill.
Any other new business? Mr. Stasiak.
Two items. One is I circulated a proposed budget schedule, and we've got a date of right before your next meeting. I actually listed 4 p.m. on the 19th. It's council's pleasure if you wanted it at 5. Reason I put 4 was my deputy auditor was going to attend, but she found a reason to get out of it, and so she's not going to be there. So if you'd prefer to do it at 5, that's fine. So I'll leave that to the chair of appropriations to determine that and whether that's an appropriate. That's on the 19th before your next council meeting. 19 at what time? It's up to the chair of appropriations whether he does it at 4 or 5.
This is our annual get together and discussion of the budget stuff that some of us actually thought we were doing today, but it wasn't. We're on a different topic. We took care of that. I would say 5 o'clock, Jim, if that works with you. At the same time, I also take and cancel strategic planning committee, which would overlap that. So I'll cancel strategic planning on the 19th, and in lieu of the committee of the whole meeting for Jim budget.
So, are you doing that as an appropriations or committee of the whole?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking about Mr. President. So, I'll do that as an appropriations committee, since that'll make it easier.
Yep.
We'll get that meeting set as appropriations. Everybody that would like to attend, would love to have you at 5 o'clock on the 19th.
Ms. Frishy.
Planning and zoning for noon on the 14th. I cannot be there. I know that usually doesn't matter. I'd like to be there, but I think Dennis also can't be there, so I don't know what you need for a quorum.
We need 3.
So everybody else good without the 2 of us?
Other new business. Seeing as though Mr. Stasiak.
Real quick, to let you know, the 3 initiatives that were filed and then the deadline passed. with regard to the 2023 general election were refiled with my office last week prior to the fair. And it's my understanding they're being circulated in the public presently. So they are back and active, so everyone knows.
Mr. Wobser,
So Jim, a question on
please say aye, and we are adjourned.